Hello and welcome to Metaphysics. This is the second follow-up to my video series on my ontology, and I want to start off with a comment from Inspiring Formula 996 just today regarding my recent follow-up, the second video in the series, right? And he asks, good questions, and maybe I need to clarify a few things, and I'm going to do that. What is presented on the screen at the moment, right? Okay, I'm wondering, does utilizing this ontological rule benefit you or hinder you in any ways? If so, how? Can you share any personal experience with utilizing or applying this in your life? Anything tangible? In what ways would your life be different if you did not utilize this ontology rule? Do you live longer than people that don't follow this rule? Are you physically healthier than people that don't follow this rule? Do you have more resources available than people that don't follow this rule? I know I'm prying, and this might be a distraction from the main topic, but I'm trying to find the value in the focus on this topic. I'm not suggesting it's not valuable. I'm craving examples if you have any to share. Fine. But this, and I gave an answer. Maybe I should read it out loud just for the sake of it, to point where this video here is going, at least the first part of it. I answer, I understand what you try to get at, but I think you misunderstand a bit what the rule is supposed to regulate. It is not a moral rule or anything like that. It is a foundational structure that all of my other philosophy, not what I'm doing, but my thinking, philosophy is thinking, right, has to adhere to, in the sense that I cannot just come up with all sorts of weird claims, arguments, or reasonings that violate this rule I have set. You know, it is not like ontology is something I invented. I just take it to its logical ultimate limit by actually doing it and adhering to it. All other references I have seen from other philosophers have merely been a mention of the idea, or just lightly refer to that to a standard or to that standard, and then they proceed to come up with whatever they want anyway, right? Usually violating those standards, but shrouded in terms and lingo. Ontology is basically a mapping of all of my phenomena, pointing out interdependencies. It is those interdependencies that usually helps you point out your own and others' shortcomings in their arguments. Okay, thank you very much, Inspiring Formulas 996, for the question. And one thing it might point to, at least, is maybe I could be better at giving a broader overview where on the map I am talking at the moment. Because, philosophy is not, just, a 10-minute video and everything is done, right? At least not from my point of view. But that doesn't mean it should necessarily be very complicated. I don't think so. I'm strongly don't think so, right? But when I talk about a particular subject, I might try to say, okay, I am within this particular aspect of the map of the whole philosophy, or the whole of philosophy, or my philosophy, right? And this is like, the question Inspiring Formula is asking is something like, well, somebody came up with the idea what a motor is and how it's put together in a car. And then Inspiring Formula is asking, well, how does this presentation or this formula or this mapping or description help you in your everyday? Well, it doesn't help me directly in my everyday unless I'm the one building that motor, right? Or doing that philosophy. But at the end of the day, at the end of all the construction of the car, it should help me in the way that it helps move my car around, right? But in the same sense, ontology is sort of a beginning, a starting point. There's a lot more to follow from ontology. This is not the final word on it. No, this is just the beginning, right? This is the prologue, right? So let me present my sort of an overview of what I mean here, right? First of all, where do you start in philosophy, right? This is sort of a philosophical or an overview of complete philosophy, in my opinion, right? And there might be more you need to add, but this is sort of the cornerstones, right? First of all, you cannot just start arguing out of nowhere, in my opinion. You have to find some anchor point where you start and say, this is my beginning. Therefore, I think, as it stands now for me, the only way to do that is some kind of reduction to a base. And the reduction is, for instance, you start by saying, okay, I have this. How do I find that? Did I get to it? How did I get to it? How did I get to it? And you will end up somewhere you can't go any further, right? And this sort of a Cartesian or Descartes approach, right? This is Cartesian doubt or Cartesian sort of, how did I get to that? Can I be sure of that? No. How did I get to it? I'm not really sure. Somebody told me. Well, I have to put it aside, right? It's sort of this kind of approach. And when you do these kinds of reductions, if it converges towards something that usually is where you end up, can't reduce any further, that's likely to be where your base is. And when you have that base, you don't deconstruct, you reconstruct, maybe you could say, take all of the rest of your phenomena and explain them from your base, right? What follows from what is dependent on what, how many categories are there, and so on. That's ontology. You're basically describing your phenomena, right? As I presented in my video. And I'm right here. The step 2 is build an ontology, and it's axiomatic. It's like, I'm going with this, right? I have a category called A and a category called B, a category called C. These are axioms, in my opinion. It's not reasoned. It's observed, or it's philosophized, maybe you could say, right? I'm not even sure what term to put on, right? These, in my opinions, are axioms. And what is the obvious next step from the base? Well, then you go from the base A to category B. Is there an obvious next step from that? A, B, and then to C, and so on, and so on, and so on, as I presented in my video, right? Okay, so the next step, I would say, is dealing with the idea of an external world, right? Is my ontology the whole picture? It's the whole picture I have access to, but might there be something I don't have access to? Can I rule that out, right? In order to get the full picture, I maybe also need to map that which I might not have access to. Well, if I don't have access to it, I can't say it's there, but then I can't refute it either, right? That's one way to approach it. So therefore, maybe you need to, just for yourself, if you want to stay a solipsist, maybe you don't only need an ontology and that's it, right? But if you're going to do an external world approach and say, well, I'm going to establish an external world or an approach to external world, this, that, and the other way, but it's a dangerous territory. Be careful, because it is fraught with imagination and things people want to be there, and Bernardo Kastrup is a good example, right? And all mystics and all, they want, it's a safe space of philosophy where you can go and have whatever you want, basically, right? So, I have illuminated a bit on my approach to this, and I'll just leave it at that, right? And maybe another part of the external world approach is, are there other individuals or other subjects, you could say, maybe if I consider myself a subject having these particular experiences or phenomena, would there be in an external world somebody else having the same experience as me, and so on and so on and so on, right? How do you approach this? Are you saying, well, no, I don't think so, or yes? And how would you approach that? How would you understand it, describing it, and sort of approaching it? But based on your ontology, of course, right? It has to. You can't just conjure up shit now, right? You build an ontology. You can't just start to talk about some external world without referencing your ontology. Otherwise, you're bullshitting me, right? Because your philosophy is something that came after there have been some experiences, like the qualia and the abstractions, and you have come up with some philosophizing, right? You are able to imagine that there might be something beyond your experiences, but that doesn't mean there is something beyond your experiences, right? But how do you get to that? Well, it has to, in my opinion, my philosophy is, it has to be anchored somehow in your ontology. Some way or another, it has to be anchored in it. Otherwise, I consider it just, magic thinking, right? I want there to be this, and because it's this, every time I have this experience, I'm saying that is the this that is responsible for it, right? Then I can come up with basically whatever I want. I could say that everything is made of okigoki, as I've said before, right? Well, when people ask, well, what is okigoki? Well, I'll say that that's what everything is made of, right? But what people do is saying something like it's all made of mind. And because people have heard the term mind before, they accept that as an explanation. It is no explanation, right? Because you're not experiencing mind. You're not cognizing mind. Mind is an abstraction or a category that is basically invented. So it cannot be responsible for that which is responsible for creating that abstraction, right? So that's why the ontology is important, and with reference to the comment by Inspiring, I forget your name, sorry, but that this is a anchor point where you go and check, no, you can't do that, and I can't do that either, right? I can't just violate my ontology. Why the hell would I do it then, right? If I'm jumping into violations immediately after. So it all has to hang together. An external world approach has to be anchored in ontology, right? When we get to the next category, it has to be anchored in the prior category, and the next category after that has to be connected to its prior category, and so on. It has to hang together. You can't philosophize out of the blue, disconnected from everything, because why did you do all that other philosophy? It's not connected with the next step, so to say, right? That's why, people talk, and someone like Bernardo Castro also talks about reason and evidence, right? This is an appeal to things are connected. Because of this follows. That's a connection, right? At least in a philosophical manner. Therefore, I'm taking I'm going all in on this connection. Everything has to be connected, obviously, right? To me, at least. And, if I have a philosophy and I say everything has to be connected, and then somebody else says, yes, I have a philosophy, but it doesn't necessarily have to be connected, I feel free to say, well, I'm not probably going to, trust much of your philosophy then, right? So, the external world approach. The next step, I would say, is a definition of knowledge. Why would I need knowledge? Well, as I say, define what you mean by knowledge with direct reference to your ontology, right? And maybe why you need knowledge, and define what you mean by it, right? And then define knowledge as a specific aspect of your ontology by doing epistemology. Epistemology is the philosophy needed in order to get to this definition of knowledge, right? It's sort of basic, right? It's not necessarily easy, but it's sort of one thing takes the other, right? I would like to invent a category called objectivity. And by objectivity, I mean, how do I agree with other individuals? Of course, supplied that I am working with the idea of other individuals, right? That I might need a definition of individuals in order to get to knowledge and so on, qua the earlier step, the external world and potential describing what I mean by other individuals. So, how do I agree on knowledge? And then define what you mean by objectivity with direct reference to knowledge, right? And morality is the next one. Well, objectivity is what is there? And then morality is then what do I do, right? Or what do I don't do, maybe, right? Maybe a sort of variations on that thinking, right? And first of all, remind point out that I think that knowledge, objectivity, and morality, these are definitions. Maybe a moral principle is not a definition, but a formulation based on the definition of what I mean by morality. So, in morality, define what you mean by morality and a moral principle by doing ethics, right? Then formulate your moral principle with direct reference to I should have written objectivity, but to knowledge, right? But objectivity, because that's what we can agree on. If I'm alone on an island, why would I need morality? I can't piss somebody off, right? I wouldn't think, right? So morality arrives as soon as there's somebody else, competing for the resources or whatever, right? So I need my moral principle. Then, as I write here, live life. So your question is surely valid, but the point is, ontology is a very early step in a complete picture of philosophy, right? It's the motor of the car, so to say, right? But but describing the motor is not a description of the idea of your motor is not a principle to live by, so to say, or drive your car by, right? That comes way down the line when you put everything else together, right? So instead of live life, then after your philosophy, when you're creating a car, drive your car, right? Baby, you can drive my car. So that's just sort of my mental overview of the connectivity of philosophy and the various aspects within it, right? Okay, the next one let me see if I can. Yes, I did something on Hume in my last one, but it didn't come across as well as I had hoped, actually. It was not well prepared, and let me see if I'm better prepared for this one, right? I'm giving you my, my sweet and simple overview of my ontology here, right? Category A is my colors, my sound, smell, touch, and taste, right? B are the cognitions like person, earth, beaver, and Eiffel Tower, right? These are just pictorial representations in order to give you an idea. But I couldn't do the same thing with a color or a sound or a smell. How would I present a color? I could make a red blemish maybe, right? But it's not necessarily red as such, right? A sound, how would I do that? I can't. So then I should have to play a sound or whatever, a smell or touch or taste, right? So these are more obscure than the actual cognitions, which are very easy to find. You go on Pixabay and find all sorts of pictures of this, that, and the other, right? So this also illuminates a difference between category A and category B. But category B are all dependent on qualia, right? You can't have a cognition without a qualia. And I would say you can't have a cognition without a color. Without color, you don't have cognition. You might, by a sound, be able to trigger the idea of, for instance, a tiger, but that doesn't mean you have a cognition of tiger, right? So there are maybe some gray areas there that you need to sort of be aware of, right? And then the abstractions, mind and matter, ethics, reason, emotion, and so on, category C, right? Okay, so if we take Hume's is ought, right? Hume talked about in the Treatise of Human Nature, he says something like, it establishes the being of, well, that's existence, right? That would be, in my opinion, cognitions. The existence of the Eiffel Tower, the existence of the beaver, not Justin Bieber, right? but Justin Bieber, nice beaver, right? Nice beaver, nice beaver. Peaches. And earth and person, right? These are all cognitions, and these are the existence, in my opinion. So that is a reference to category B, according to how Hume describes how people erroneously argue for morality, right? And then he says, then of a sudden, this of a sudden is a appeal, in my opinion, to a deductive structure, which is logic, which is category C. That is not invalid so far. You go from B, then you go to C. I mean, just the basics of it, right? It's sort of okay from B to C. Okay, fine, right? Okay, it's possibly okay, right? And then they say something like ought or ought not. These are moral, categorical, right? These are C. These are commandments, these are morality, these are ethics, and so on. This is category C things, right? But they are arrived at with emotions, which is also category C. In my opinion, the ought is, I have an emotion that this is not right, therefore ought, right? But it's the commandment that is not stated, that is implied by an ought, right? Which is implying a rearrangement of existence, or an arrangement of existence that is in a particular direction compared to some other unwanted direction, right? So I have to control existence. Well, that is a category B, right? You should or shouldn't, right? There's an appeal to a category B. That's an invalid step backwards, right? And the point is, if the ought is pointed at yourself, I don't have any problem with your violation, because you're not violating my philosophy then, right? I'm just observing you potentially from the outside and just observing your behavior. So within yourself, you can do all you want, basically. But if you are starting to bossing me around, you are going backwards in my ontology to a category B then. And I'm going to say, no, that doesn't work, right? You can't go from an emotion or immorality to bossing me around, right? It's a backward ontology, backward in the ontology. It doesn't follow, in my opinion, right? So, as I say here, the ought, the bossing around of others, is the problem. The receiver of an ought merely has a sound, right? When you're saying, you ought, you're merely having a sound, category A, right? A sound is not my morality. I have my own principle. You can't start to order me around without asking me about my moral principle, right? Who the fuck gave you that permission, right? Yourself, right? Your self-appointed dictator of people's behavior, right? The ought spewer, as I call it, expects the listener to accept the jump from their A to a C, just like that. And then the listener to regulate themselves in a B from this invalid interpretation of an A as a C, authoritarian fallacy. Now, this is convoluted. I'm not really sure now what the hell I was thinking here, right? But let me take it one step at a time. Expects the listener to accept a jump from A to C. Yes. The C is the ought, right? They have just hearing a sound, and then they expect that to just turn into a moral principle of some kind, right? Sound expected to be interpreted as an ought, which is morality, which is a C. So a sound has to be converted without any further clarification into a C. That doesn't sound right to me. But let's keep it there, right? And then the listener to regulate themselves in a B. Yeah, because they have to step from A to C by sound, then morality via the ought, and the ought implies a regulation of existence. You have to do this, you have to do that chair have to be there, that person have to stand there, and so on. Right? That is a category B. Then you're going backwards, right? But it's the backward of my reception of your commandment. If you're commanding yourself, I'm none the wiser, right? I don't know what the hell you're doing, right? I don't have access to your philosophy. I only have access to the sounds that you claim is your philosophy, right? And that's also why I'm saying, don't take this as a gospel of any kind. This is merely an appeal to you go and think up your own philosophy, right? You can't expect somebody else to think for you. What they're always going to do is say, give me some fucking money or I'll shoot you, right? Authoritarian fallacy. So I'm not sure what the hell I meant by that authoritarian fallacy. Maybe it's that, it must be that I made a sound. You have to convert it into morality and I expect you to behave in a certain way. So it jumped from a sound to a morality, and then you expect to jump backward in your ontology, or at least in my ontology's understanding of my ontology, and regulate yourself according to my sounds. It's crazy, man, right? Okay. The last thing is I need to arrive at my morality using my abstractions. Ontology, following epistemology, following ethics, with reference to my recent, or the prior presentation, right? The prior slide in this one. Category C, right? Based on my ontology, ABC. And then only I can rearrange me in a category B scenario, right? I can regulate myself using my philosophy without saying any fucking words. So it means that mute people can be as moral as non-mute people, right? You don't have to tell anybody about your philosophy, right? You don't have to tell anybody about it. And you can still be as functional as somebody who tells everybody else about their philosophy, right? It might not be the same result in the end that I would think that it's a good idea to be able to communicate with others in order to get what you want in some kind of moral or not immoral scenario, right? But at the end of the day, it's about my morality. I'm using my abstractions, right? I'm abstracting a philosophy and so on, to creating ethics and so on, in category C based on my ontology, ABC. It's all about me, my morality, my abstractions, and then I arrange me in the world in a category B scenario, right? I'm going backwards, but that's none of your business, right? If I'm going backwards in my ontology, I am not violating your ontology because you don't know what the fuck is going on in my mind, right? You don't have access to my mind. Right? So, and maybe, I guess you could argue that if morality is a backward step from abstraction into a rearrangement of cognitions, then you're taking a backward step according to my ontology. Maybe there's a problem there. Maybe it needs to be further investigated, and maybe I need to do some thinking there, right? But what I'm saying is that I have to take a route. Maybe it's about a time. It's the past, now, and future. It's the sliding of time and what is now and what is the past and what is the future, which becomes the now and so on. And therefore, these qualia cognition abstraction, which is also an appeal to time to some extent, right? That they have to fit across each other based on what I expected to do and what I actually did. So there's this sliding of two sets of ABCs, right? But maybe that's a bit too convoluted or complex for this presentation. But I hope it illuminates you about how this is Hume's is, or maybe not the easiest one to grasp. And it's also a lot about interpretation of what he actually tried to put across, right? But it's an example of how you could possibly try to deconstruct what somebody says and see how it fits with your ontology, and whether or not you're going to trust it or not, right? And I'm pretty much on board with what Hume says. It's more like how do I approach a conclusion about what is actually going on there with Hume, right? So there might be more to what Hume is pointing at than he's actually describing. So, but I hope it illuminates and I hope it helps. At least I am try my best to express how I think, right? I think it's unavoidable that there has to be some structure. There has to be, it cannot be all just throwing words around that make you feel good. I don't trust that. Somebody just saying, oh, it's about love and the dance of existence. Like Bernardo Castro says, fuck you, man, right? I need something that is clear cut. And then you can't just throw, fancy word at me and manipulate my emotion or something like that. I don't trust that. It has to be clear, in my opinion, in this fashion. Otherwise, I'm not one for trusting it, right? It might be somebody who's trying to get there, right? When I started out philosophizing, I wasn't particularly good at it looking back now, right? Even though I might have thought I was pretty smart, right? But as I kept philosophizing, I found, I need to get a grasp on that. How did I know that? I'm not sure about that. I need to, one thing takes the other, right? But you've got to start somewhere, right? If you haven't started yet, it's about time you do it, right? You should have started yesterday, right? So I can appeal you to start philosophizing because I think that there's a notion to me that human beings seems to have a fucking incredible gift in some way. And I don't like the term gift, right? Because there's somebody handing you something to you, right? But what word would you use then? Potential, right? In using their mind, using their brain, using their phenomena, using their ability to philosophize and categorize and coming up with ideas and doing shit that is interesting and so on, right? But people seems to be, they would rather not do it and then let somebody else do it and then enforce their laws on them, which is basically as close to stupid as you can get, right? It's maybe even beyond stupid, right? And that's one of the reasons why I hate public schooling or schooling of any kind with a vengeance. Because it takes away, it destroys your need and want and ability to think for yourself. You're basically told you shouldn't think for yourself. Read this, do that, sit there, say this, shut up, ask before you can go to the toilet and so on, right? Turned into a fucking slave. That's not the road forward for, any kind of taking advantage of the potential of human beings, right? So it's just, it's kind of frustrating that it's sort of a uphill battle. How do you convince? It's the old Mark Twain possibly, right? That it's easier to fool people than convince them that they have been fooled, right? When first people have some fucking stupid idea in their head, it's impossible to change their minds. Unless, of course, you're a government and have some guns and threaten them with, and scare them in shitless. Then they are going to do whatever they are being told, right? That's the exception, but that's because of the guns, right? If people have grown up with, for instance, the fiat monetary system, right? They have learned that when you have these pieces of paper or numbers on your card or whatever, you can go and buy shit, right? Because your government tells you so, right? But when when Bitcoin or cryptos comes along, and people say, well, it's a new kind of money. People are like, what? New kind of money? No. That's probably dangerous. Probably terrorists, right? It is probably something, somebody's taking advantage of you somewhere, right? No, but it's just a free market. You can choose not to do it. Oh, can I choose? I don't want to choose. I want a government to tell me what kind of money I should use, right? This is what you're up against, right? As an example, right? So just my 2 cents, right? Okay, please share, like, and subscribe. Give me a comment. What do you think? Otherwise, consider a donation, links below, or crypto. Apropos cryptos, there are crypto links on my Discord board, also links below. And otherwise, See you in the next one. Have a nice day.